Good morning, and thanks for getting up early. Most of you don't. I think almost none of you know me. That's probably true, right? Raise your hand if you've ever seen me before. Yeah, see, that's awesome. So I late last month became the first chairperson of the Node.js Foundation, and along with a lot of other people, I worked for most of last year trying to make the foundation happen. So it's pretty exciting that we finally have gotten to a place. And I'm excited to meet all of you. I've been involved in open source, it seems like, since the dawn of time, although, of course, Richard Stallman has me beat, but a long time, and with a lot of different projects. And so when I asked Michael what he wanted me to talk about, he said, other projects that have had to grow up, is sort of what he said. And so here's what I have to say about that. The most successful open source projects, the ones that we all know about, are a mixture of corporate and individual involvement. It's just the way of the world. It's really expensive to keep a project floating. And so finding out who your corporate friends are is one of the reasons that you start a foundation, because they help with that. And Node has some really good corporate friends. So this time last year, the trademark owner, was the main corporation that you guys all knew, and then everybody else was sort of in the shadows. But they've come out now, and I think that's a good thing. The things that Node needs, first of all, unity. So thank you to anybody here who worked on IOJS and helped vote on the idea of bringing it back under the Node umbrella. The reason that's important is because once you establish a really good trademark, you don't want to fight with it. You want people to just be able to go find what you're working on under that trademark. So I feel like the job of the foundation is to make sure that we stay out of the way of the technical committees to allow that to happen, so that the reunification is smooth and everybody feels heard and nobody feels dictated to. And then right after that, to help you with some of what we know, because we've all been in this business a long time, about how you take a great project and make it sustainable, make it even greater. Michael and I have been talking a lot about how Apache does things, how some other famous projects do things, sort of the pros and cons of, we know a lot about what works and what doesn't at Apache now. Some of the modern tools that Apache won't even touch that you guys all love to work with, and how we sort of translate how that works to what you're doing. And I think in the next, year, which is how long I'll be chairperson unless they reelect me, you'll see from us mostly support in the direction of helping amplify the message that Node is a safe place to be. It's a really good tool set. And we hope that even more users will pick it up, and that some of them will decide to send contributors in, because that's how you grow a project, is you build community of contributors. We spent a fair amount of time explaining this to some of the people that are new to open source that are on the sponsoring side. And my meme these days for how open source could get better is I really want to see big companies stop thinking of open source projects as fungible. Do you guys know what that word means? That means you can plug a resource in anywhere it's needed. I mean, human resources, anywhere it's needed, and you can take it away anytime it doesn't fit your business needs anymore. At the beginning of open source, at the beginning of Apache, there were a lot of people who would say things like, if they ever told me I couldn't work on this project anymore, my big company that employs me, I would quit, because this is more important to me. This is my quality of life. And big companies kind of lose that nuance a lot, because they think of their employees as deployable assets. So I work for PayPal, which I've been doing for the last 20 months. And my friends in the open source world always say, why PayPal? Why would you do that? Because before that, I worked for Apple and Sun and Intel. And, so why PayPal, right? And the answer is, PayPal has an interesting set of things going on. A lot of the change that they're going through was expressed by Node. So you guys all know who Bill Scott is. Yeah. So he kind of recruited me. He was on the team of people that recruited me to come into the company and try to help them figure out how to get smart about open source across the company instead of just in little pockets of people that basically came from the outside. And one of the big things I'm trying to get them to understand is you cannot take a team, throw them at an open source project, and then decide that you're tired of that and move them to a different project. That's not how it works. They might decide they want to work in that project. You might suggest to them they have a look at it. But fundamentally, we identify with our work. We're more like artists than we are like cogs in a wheel. That's fundamental to open source. And I'm really working hard to say, and I've tweeted it kind of every month for a while now, open source is people. At the end of the day, open source is people. And companies see value in being aligned with these open projects because they're great software, they're valuable. It's where all of the juice in our world is going right now. That alignment, we need to push back when they try to treat us or our projects as though we're just, fungible resources. That's a problem. So I invite you to do that. Push back. When I was at Sun and we were trying to open source Java, it was a little bit of the guerrilla warfare we were going through. And my co-conspirators and I used to say, oh my God, we might get fired for this thing we're trying to do this week. But on the other hand, if we get fired for trying to open source Java, would that be career limiting? I don't think so. I think people would want us right away. And be heartened by the fact that if you're showing up here and you're doing great work, everybody's seeing it. You can take some risk because you know that everybody knows who you are. You can build reputation here. And I'm really heartened to see so many women in this community. When I say so many, I realize you'd like to see more, but it's not uncommon in a sort of nascent technology to see like one woman or two women. So, it looks like there's about a dozen of you out there. And yay, hopefully there'll be more. These things like the codes of conduct are really important because they help build the diversity of your group, and you want that diverse group. In a way, open source used to be the home of sort of the lost children. We all kind of found each other in open source. We were people who said too much in meetings, whose parents were worried about whether we were ever going to have a real job. I remember in India one time, I had a kid come up to me after a conference and say, I really want you to give a talk at my university because they're getting ready to kick me out. They keep trying to teach me COBOL, and I just want to hack on Linux. We're like miles apart. And the administration has no way of knowing that this is actually the next tide. Can you help me with that? This was, a long time ago now, 15 years ago. And so I said, sure. Yeah, it had to fit in my travel schedule. He ended up chartering a bus, bringing a bunch of people. We did a whole talk. We did an install fest. We did, a typical sort of small Linux conference, basically. And at the end of it, his dad came up to me. I didn't even realize his dad was in the audience. And he was like crying. And he said, thank you so much for showing me that what my son is doing is important. That's open source is that. So one of the things that the slide deck, oh, by the way, I did a talk about what I think is wrong with open source at OSCON, and you can find a video of it now. So since it's on video, I'm not going to bother giving it all to you again. But I will say that one of the things that I said there, in addition to open source is people, which I think is the main thing, is one of the big problems is that we won, in the sense that everybody takes open source for granted now. There's whole generations of people who didn't fight for it and take the way it works for granted. And that's dangerous. I think it's important to know what the fights were, and so that you can start to see what erosion looks like when it's happening, and you can fight back and say, no, I don't want that erosion to happen. So for instance, transparency. There are still places in the world where they want to hide their open source developers, companies want to hide their open source developers behind a single commit bit because they don't want them poached. And we always go in and say, no, you just don't understand. If the only reason they're staying with you is because they're obscure, that's not a good reason. If they're great programmers, you want to give them all the freedom in the world, and they'll choose to stay with you because of the support that they're getting to do the work that they think is important. So it's important to think about this stuff as we build a better world for Node. And I'm really excited to be in a position to try to help with that. So I would actually be very happy to take any questions anybody has, but that's sort of all I wanted to say from here. So anybody got one? I think we have a little bit of time, maybe 5-10 minutes. Come on now, don't be shy. Oh, where? Yeah, oh, there you are. Hi. We had breakfast.
Yes, it was marvelous. I figured since no one else is asking a question yet, I just come right out and say it.
Yeah.
How does it feel to be so awesome?
Well, I'm only awesome on every other day. I mean, I also suck part of the time, so just like the rest of you. Yeah, I was fortunate. I was fortunate that open source happened when it did, and that I happened to be where I was when I was, and that Tim O'Reilly and I made friends, and there were so many lucky things in there. And I know it's not fashionable for women to say they were lucky because it somehow undermines our awesomeness, but I think that that's part of the deal. That abundance that open source creates, because it's a generous thing, it's a gift economy, offers you all kinds of opportunity if you're willing to take it. All you have to do is show up and do some work and be kind-hearted. My favorite code of conduct is sort of be awesome to each other. I realize that's not clear enough for some people, but that's fundamentally what we're asking for, right? So try to give back more than you take. As Tim O'Reilly's been saying it for about 3 years now, create more value than you monetize. Be generous. That's the secret to everything, as it turns out. Good? You're welcome. Anybody else? Yeah. Sure. A little bit more about the foundation. So the foundation is really just starting. We had our first meeting with a real board, with a real set of officers, like the end of last month. The meeting before that was just us saying yes to a lot of things that the Linux Foundation asked us to say yes to. Like, here's your bylaws. Do you adopt them? Here are the committees. Do you adopt those? The committees, by the way, the working groups have all been maintained from IOJS, plus a couple of new ones. There's a trademark one now because the foundation owns the trademark. Well, the foundation licenses the trademark from the owner, but we're sort of on the hook to make sure that we follow the rules with the trademark. So there's a legal committee, which I don't think there was before, and that's to deal with whatever legal issues come up. So what ought to happen with the foundation, a lot of money was raised, a fair amount. There could be more, but a fair amount of money was raised. The first really big thing that you got was we hired Michael as our community manager, which is a big deal. All of the companies that are involved kind of agree to lend resources to the process of making the foundation work. So somebody from IBM agreed to be in charge of the marketing committee, and to chair it. Anybody can be on it, but they're chairing it. The work of the foundation is just to manage the business side of things for Node so that the technical committees can do what they need to do. So there are various projects that the technical committee wanted to undertake, some things about compatibility, which falls out from the trademark, and from the fact that Node is growing very quickly, and if it gets too fragmented, the value proposition kind of goes away. So trying to help with that. You'll see the foundation lend its efforts or lend its weight in areas where the community feels that Node needs help. And the way we find that out is by talking to all of you. And so hopefully you'll tell us, I've heard that you're not a shy group. Hopefully you'll tell us if you think that things are needed. The job of the foundation is not, however, to say what Node should do or should be. It's very clear in the charter that the technical committee owns the sort of direction of the projects. And we're getting ready to set it up as more of an umbrella, not exactly like Apache, but similar in the sense that projects that Node is often paired with that don't sort of have a good home will probably gradually come under our umbrella if we can make it inviting enough and give them enough reasons to show up. So that's sort of the big plan, okay? You should see marketing, sort of organized marketing from us, and that means press releases sometimes, the website being updated much more frequently because that work is coming from everything you guys are doing instead of just one company's vision. And the truth is, I think Joyent tried very hard to be a good steward for Node, and because it wasn't a product they were offering, it was hard to really resource it appropriately. And in working with Scott Hammond for a long time on the idea of a foundation, I can say he really wanted to create a home where Node could really grow and flourish, and Joint would stop appearing to be a problem in that forward progress. So I think we should thank him and honor him for the work that he and the company did on allowing this to happen. It wasn't conceptually an easy idea. It took a while to have those conversations. So, does that help? Great. Somebody else? Yeah.
Yeah, I want to ask a question. Open source is a lot easier to use than to contribute to. So if you have a full-time job and you would like to, I don't know, share the knowledge, use more value, right? How would you do that if you don't get that support from your employer, or you just literally like, I don't know, how do you start small?
Okay, so the question is, how do you start small as a contributor and get your employer to help you or let you do the work? What country do you work from? Here in Ireland. Okay, great. So in California, where I'm from, there has been case law over the last 25 years, 30, 40 years now, to make it very clear that anybody can work on anything they want in their free time. So it used to be companies asserted the belief that they owned your inventions. Even if you had a dream in the middle of the night and wrote it down, it somehow belonged to them. And that has been challenged successfully in California many times now. And so we feel perfectly comfortable advising employees of any company that they can work on open source projects at their wish on their own time. Now here's the tricky bit. Once you build a reputation in a project, your company will either recognize you for that reputation and give you some time to work on it, or somebody else will hire you. It's a little secret of open source, right? When I said that open source open source projects are not fungible, but open source people have more ability to choose employment just because we're better. We're better. We know we're better because we do our work in public and people can see our code. And if you don't believe that we're better, go into a proprietary company and start looking at the code. Open source code is better. So there was a study done a few years ago that said that we also earn slightly more money, about a third more. Well, not slightly more than, huh? And how does that all happen? Part of it is you taking a risk. So open source people are risk takers. They are. This is why there isn't a ton of open source in Japan yet, because culturally it's too hard for them to step up and take that risk and maybe be, not successful and lose face. And it's changing a little bit. The younger generation's getting to be really good at doing these things. But historically, that's been hard. And there are certain other countries where it's hard to take the risk. But I promise you, if you're good and you start building reputation in an open source project, either your employer will go, wow, that is so good you did that. That's important to us. We wanted you to do that more. Or somebody else will hire you to do that pretty much all the time. That's how it's been working out. It should offer you more opportunity. That's what it did for me, and I'm not the only person that I've seen that work for. But you do have to take the risk, at least at the very beginning. Yeah? And this project, hopefully, tell me I'm wrong, you guys should be willing to allow new people to come in, and you should be a little generous with those new people. You have a choice now that you can choose again. If that's not how this community works, and honestly, I haven't spent a lot of time inside this community yet, although I came here partly to meet you all. If that's not how this community works today, you can change it to make it more like that just by refusing to allow the other thing to happen. I serve right now and have served for the last 4 years on the board of the Drupal Association. Drupal is a CMS for building websites. It was written in Belgium. And that is a really interesting community. Part of the reason I said yes when they asked me if I would serve on their board was because they have more women than any other open source project. The gender balance it's not quite 50-50, but it's pretty close. And that happens because those it's where it lives in the ecosystem. It's I'm building a website for you tool, and so it's not uncommon for companies to start up in people's houses, where one of the partners is a coder and the other one maybe is a designer or does the business side of things, and they create these little lifestyle companies. Drupal grew very quickly on that basis of those lifestyle companies. But Dries Betaard, who was the founder of Drupal, and Angie Byron, who is the first community manager, just refused to allow anything other than excellence to each person. Angie is a gay woman, but she's fundamentally gender blind. And when someone comes to her with a technical question, and it's the first time she's talking to them, she treats them with the same civility that she would a core committer or anybody else. And she's very helpful. And Dries too. And that set a tone and a bar for the whole community. And lo and behold, it's possible to be a woman there. It's possible to grow your technical skills as a woman from inside that organization. That's not a bad goal to have as a new foundation. I'm not going to put it on you because, like I said, technical group gets to decide. But the alternative is something like Wikipedia, where I was the CTO. The editorial community is frankly pretty misogynistic. It's been very well documented. And, I think they're the poorer for it. I know that the editorial community is dwindling, at least in part because they're so nasty to each other, people get tired. So my advice would be welcoming. Yeah? Anybody else? Oh, come on. I cannot have answered every question you've ever had. There's one. Well, first, we just want to get started. We're just setting up. So the Linux Foundation is kind of our parent. And some of the services that a foundation normally needs, like legal services and marketing services, we get because we're part of the Linux Foundation umbrella. They have a regular way to do things, a pro forma way to set up these things. And they've done a bunch of them. They did the Cloud Foundry. They've done a bunch of them. They kind of have a regular package, a regular way they approach the thing. There's, I think, some tweaks that need to happen to that package in order for it to allow this community to flourish. So one of my goals is to make those little tweaks. We did one right before the election, right before the board got sort of incorporated, which was there didn't used to be a way to elect a person from the community to serve as a voting member on the board, just person at large. So you basically had to pay to play, or you had to be the leader of the technical committee. And that seemed like it was a little foreign from the way that I've seen working boards actually work. You have to know what's going on with the whole community, not just a narrow slice. So we did make that change. But we haven't yet scheduled those elections. We haven't figured out how many seats that comprises. Those conversations are yet to happen. We need to recruit more people to buy into the board because that earns money for the board to have assets to do big projects like working on compatibility. We'd like to get those efforts at least set up for success in this first year. Board work takes a long time, and many of the people on this board have not served on an open source board before. So getting them used to what that work feels like is at least part of the work. You have to look at this with a long view. The reunification of the code work is going on very well from everything that I've heard. And that's an important step. And by the way, I said that I've been doing this a long time. I haven't seen that many forks heal. It's a big deal that you guys are choosing to do this. The last really big one that I saw was Perl, which is a long time ago. But after that fork was healed in Perl, it got huge. And the only thing that really limited Perl at the end of the day was the founder's ability to continue to innovate and create better and better versions. That's why I think it's great that this is not a single monolithic benevolent dictator kind of community anymore, because there's a lot of pressure put on that benevolent dictator to continue to be great. If you look at what Linus has done with the kernel, he's pretty much stepped out of the way. He kind of arbitrates now, but all the lieutenants are kind of his consensus board. And I think that's a stronger position. You never want to be dependent on a single person. Anyway, you asked what we're doing. we're setting up the business of the foundation, trying to make sure the committees are set up, meeting regularly, doing the right work, reporting back, and that the technical committee is left to do the work that they need to do. Given good feedback about what's going on with the other layers, right? The user community, the module builders, those kinds of things. But generally, to just create an ecosystem where the reunification can really flourish. That's our first job. And then, as I mentioned before, we're working on building an umbrella ecosystem so that other projects that are really key to Node success that don't have good homes can come into our home as well. Those are our two big things. And then more community representation. Good? Anybody else? Well, I might be just about out of time. Is that true? You guys, pretty much, more or less? All right. So, so anyway, I'll be around. I'm not going anywhere, I don't think, at least not before Wednesday night. So, feel free to find me and talk to me if you have any questions you didn't want to voice in front of all these people. And thank you so much for showing up and letting me come meet you all. And have a great conference.